Good morning. My name is Molly Pitkin, and I am the high school youth leader, one of them here at Colonial. And this summer, we have been talking about discipleship and what are the core parts of discipleship, the stages of discipleship, what that looks like in Scripture, and how we can embody that in our own lives. And it's just so God, the fact that this past year, discipleship relationships have been a huge part of high school ministry. And so on stage, we have just a small snippet of the discipleship dynamics that have been happening in our ministry. And so we figured what better way than on Student Sunday to share about actual concrete experiences of discipleship as we're unpacking these key elements. So I'm going to have our panel here introduce themselves, and also as they're introducing themselves, share about how you got connected. They're sitting with their discipleship partner, so they'll describe that as they go down the line.
Okay, I'm Gabe Freeman. The way me and Corey started was I met him at SML one time, and we were talking about Cane's chicken fingers because it's the best. And so he's like, yo, let's just go to Cane's after church. And I was like, very cool, let's do it. And little did I know it was going to start our discipleship.
I'm Corey McIlvain. Gabe and I met, like at SML, but I think even before that, when I was the last known survivor of living in the queue. I was very much a creepy guy on a motorcycle that the kids had no clue who I was. And so him and I just started as a friendship and just kind of hanging out.
Hi, I'm Becca Cannon.
Hi, I'm Lori Harrison. I don't see those pictures up on the screen there for everybody else to see.
Oh, yes.
Well, I've known Becca's family for a long time, and her sister Rachel went to Guatemala with us probably about 5 years ago. And so when Molly asked me and Roy to help with the Sunday Morning Live, SML as they call it, last fall, it was just natural that I would be connected with Becca. We have a mutual love of Spanish and international cultures, and I also mentored Kate Chin, who's actually from Costa Rica. She grew up in Costa Rica. Her parents are missionaries with Young Life. So the three of us have a common interest, and that picture's of us in Guatemala City Airport. We just got back from the mission trip to Guatemala.
I'm Barb Yurkovich. Hi.
I'm Julia Edmondson, and so Barb and I met shortly after Barb started helping out in SML as well. And so towards the beginning of the school year, I had been talking to Molly about some frustrations I had in my own prayer life and my desire to grow in that area. And so Molly and I had that conversation, and then a few days later, she texted me. She was like, I have the perfect person to disciple you. Barb, she's amazing. And Molly was telling me about how Barb had impacted Molly when she was younger in her prayer life, and so she just thought that Barb and I would be a good match.
Hi, I'm Sam Kohlberg. So the story of how John and I met. Oh, yeah, okay. I was confused. Okay, so it's a bit of a longer story. I'll try to get through it. I hope you enjoy it. But it all started, I'm a junior now. I'm going into my junior year. It all started going into my freshman year. I'd heard the legend of John Krager. He's sort of a legend among the youth group. He's been serving for like 10 years. So I heard about him and his wonky ball and all these things he's done. So I'm like, okay, who is this guy? Let's see who this guy is. So we sort of meet him. He's like, I'm a little scared of him, a little intimidated, but he seems like a nice enough guy. So I start talking to him, and I find out he's been to Scotland. Now, I have always wanted to go to Scotland because of the movie Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster. I'm dead serious. It is a terrific movie. So I said, hey, John, I want to go to Scotland. You've been to Scotland. Let's go to a coffee house and talk about it. So we went there, and we sort of hung out. We talked about it. He told me some hilarious stories. I'm like, okay, I like this. And then he just flips a switch like that, and he starts talking about, like, girls and temptations, and he gets really deep, and I'm, like, freaked out. I'm like, what is going on? I thought we were talking about the Loch Ness Monster. But he, I'm sure if he gave me that discussion now, I'm sure it'd be very good. It'd be fruitful. But just in that moment, our first time meeting, I was terrified. So then he drove me home, and I was scared because he knew where I lived. And then And then I talked to my parents for like half an hour. I'm like, oh, geez, I can't meet with this guy again. I vowed to never meet with him again. And then 6 months later, Corey McElvain here, he was the youth pastor at the time. I was interested in being on the leadership team, Pursue team, in the high school. So I was meeting with Corey, me and my brother, and Corey was like, okay, Sam, if you're going to do this, you have to have a mentor. And I'm thinking, please do not say John Krager. And then he says, Sam, I want you to meet with John Krager. I'm like, so I explained to him why I didn't necessarily want to do that, but he was like, no, Sam, that's stupid. You're going to meet with John Krager. It's going to be great. So I reluctantly texted John, and we've met ever since. It's been like a year now. It's been terrific. But that is sort of that's the long version of how we met.
And I'm John Krager. And the picture is actually of me in 8th grade, and that's one of Sam not long ago. And so I like to tell him that this is his future. Because we look shockingly alike. Also, when Sam and I went to Walmart yesterday, we had no idea we were going to end up matching, but it's a miracle of the Lord.
Holy Spirit.
So fun. So you too can match with your discipleship person. No, it's really special to hear about the fun, maybe perhaps scary ways that you got connected and just the spiritual themes that truly God brought you all together. And because of all of your other relationships as well, we're here right now. So thanks for sharing a little bit about that. Now I would love to hear, and for everyone else to hear, kind of the structure of your discipleship time. What does it look like? Where do you meet? What do you eat? What do you talk about? All those fun details.
So me and Corey usually go out for lunch or dinner, just somewhere to get food. And we usually start by just like catching up with each other, like how's your week been? And we talk about all different stuff from like sports to girls, stuff like that. And then Corey usually has a lesson planned out, and we went through like this packet, and we read through the Bible sometimes and talk about like how I can use these different skills I've learned throughout my life, or like use these different skills I learned from the lesson in my personal life, just to like spread Christianity and spread the light in my school and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we usually go out to get food, and one time we went to this place that had a couple pinball machines, and we spent like an hour playing pinball, so that was a good time.
Lori and my time often looks relatively similar. We get to meet. We love coffee, so we go to Caribou Coffee a lot, and just get to start by getting to know each other and asking questions. And that's one of my favorite parts of it, is just the intentional time of fellowship together. In my friend group, I'm often the listener, and so to be able to have someone just to share my heart with and just like let know how I'm going is just really impactful to me. And then we often go through some sort of structured time. For us, it's been the discipleship book. And then one other thing that me and Lori have also done is go through this sort of quiz to go and look at my abilities and passions spiritually, just to get to know me better as where God is going to lead me. So.
When Julia and I get together, we go to Pilgrim Coffee Company. And we kind of have, that's like our standing thing. They know us there now, and it's awesome. But we go there and we talk about life, talk about all her involvement and all her different activities she's in. This helps me to know how to pray for her and just situations that she's going through in life every day at school. She'll be a senior this year, and so the high school years, as you can imagine, are challenging, and they're trying to figure out all kinds of direction for their life. So it's fun to walk that path with them. We have done some word studies in the Bible and let her pick out a word that we started with, and it was faithfulness, and I'll let her talk about that in a second. But we go through that, and then we pray about all those things that we have just talked about and future, and so that's where we leave it. We meet once, twice a month sometimes, and we talk a lot on text.
So Sam and I set aside 6 or 7 hours The first 4 are spent in silent prayer. No, Sam and I meet about every other Saturday at Revo Cup South. So one of the things that I'll probably talk about a little more later, but is how discipleship forces me to grow as well. And one of the things that we have been trying to build into our structure, because I am terrible at remembering to do, is to spend time in prayer, like to open up in prayer and to spend time in prayer. So that's one of the things we're building into the structure, which is cool. The Lord is teaching me through discipleship to how to better approach spending time with Him. But then when we first started meeting, we went through James and walked through the book of James together, kind of pulled it apart and things like that. As we've gone forward, there was another book that we started. Right now, we're actually focusing a lot more just on what discipleship looks like, and Sam going out and discipling more in his own life. And so we'll look at the Word and we'll look at things like that. There's a lot of times where Sam may text me during the week and say, "Hey, I've got a question about this." And to his eternal frustration, I say, "Great, you do the research and try to answer the question yourself from what's in the Word, and then I'll do the same, and we'll come together on our Saturday and we'll talk through it." And so we'll have that. Sometimes I give him homework assignments, which he loves. But I give him homework assignments, and then when we meet again, I can say, "Hey, how did this go? Did this work well?" And usually there are experiments in sharing the Word, or experiments in prayer, or experiments in just how he can better be pursuing or trying to understand the Lord, which is really fun, because then I get to try to experience those as well, and we can kind of talk down and break those down. So that's usually how our time together looks.
Awesome, thanks. So a lot of discipleship times look like intentional times of meeting for coffee or wherever, Canes even as well. But it also is outside of that too. All of these volunteers are with us on Sunday mornings or on Wednesday nights, so there's that weekly touch point in addition to the couple times a month where they're meeting up more intentionally. And then they didn't mention this necessarily in this service, but they did in others, so I'm going to steal it for them. They were talking about just how they stay connected throughout the week. Julia, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
So as Barb mentioned before, we always start off our time talking about what's going on. And she's very intentional about making sure she knows everything that's going on in my life so she can text me throughout the week. So she knows the spiritual things that I'm going through, but she also knows what basketball games I have that week and when they are. And so she can text me and be like, "How did the game go?" And also, "How are you doing at praying for this person?" And so it's been really, really encouraging for me, and also challenging as she is keeping me accountable for the things that I've said that I want to do and grow in. She's making sure that I'm doing those things, but she's also so involved in my life and coming to my games, coming to my musicals, stuff like that, and just always knowing that she's going to be there with a smiling face, or she's cheering me on from home. And she's also really good at sending me her prayers, which is just really impactful for me, because not only do I know that she's praying for me, but I know what she's praying for me. And so she'll send me throughout the day, throughout my week, the specific things that she's praying for me, as she knows what's going on in my life and the situations that I'm in. So.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so there's lots of similar themes, but also is really unique to the people who are in the discipleship relationship. So John and Sam's looks different than Gabe and Corey, and that's intentional and that's purposeful. And so I love the uniqueness about each of you using your gifts as a way to connect with each other. The next question we have is a pretty big question, but I'm very curious. How has the discipleship relationship impacted you personally, how you view yourself and how you yourself exist, and also your relationship with God? Perhaps you experience God in a different way because of your time together.
Yeah, so with mine, Gabe and I and others that I've discipled or am discipling, a lot of times I've found I'm typically looking in a mirror. We kind of pretend as if we're above, and it's ridiculous and how that feels, but the reality often is that I've got similar hurts, sins, pains, joys, just at different stages of life. And so oftentimes I was looking back into myself to kind of understand where I'm at. It's like I'm supposed to be meeting with him, and yet I'm figuring out more about who I am and my relationship with God and anything. And the other piece would also be, too, that Gabe is different than others, right? And if I don't really know who Gabe is and I don't show him who I am, like I don't really get to understand how God's going to move. We can have the greatest curriculum packet verses in the world, but if we don't listen to how God's moving in his life and in ours, it's pretty hard to help navigate what's going on. And so it has to kind of be almost this fluid relationship that exists that is real, that is authentic.
Okay, so the way I think Corey or this discipleship relationship has kind of impacted my life is, I'm like a very sciencey guy, and so I like to focus a lot on the scientific evidence and reasoning of Christianity, and so me and Corey went through this book called Evidence Unseen, and it just talked a lot about the different reasons we believe in Christianity and the historical evidence and stuff. And so that's been really helpful for me to have a good foundation on just the facts. But also, Corey's talked to me about some more abstract concepts in home church and in our discipleship meetings, such as prayer and meditation and stuff like that. And I think it's really also helped me grow in my personal relationship with God, because the things I've learned about knowing all the facts and knowledge is that you can know everything about the Bible, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have a great personal relationship. And so I've been working a lot on that too.
So this year I'm going off to college at K-State, and I have just been really doing a lot of thinking about what my purpose is and what am I going to be doing in college. There's so many different options, and I see people who have an 8-year track down the road that they've planned out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And so going into this discipleship with Lori, she's talked a lot to me about what my abilities are and who I am as a person and how God has equipped me. I find myself often comparing myself to others, and that can cause me to struggle with who am I, what am I doing, but thinking of very purposely and intentionally about who I am as a person has really helped me to see that God has a specific purpose for me that I am essential for, and that I'm the only one that can fulfill that, and that I shouldn't be wanting other people's because it's different for me and he made me that way. And so getting to go through the quiz and really focus on what are my different abilities and talents and passions has been really cool. But then also, Lori is the leader of the Guatemala mission trip, and so she invited me on that, and I've been wanting to go for a while since I've heard my sister about it. And so going on that trip this past week was absolutely amazing, both in the way that I got to use my passions to serve the Lord, because I love Spanish, and just getting to serve, and then my different talents like leadership and teaching that God has given me, but I'm also using those for the Lord. And to me, that was just a time of very much fulfillment and contentment, just because I was having that really just focused purpose and doing it for God. And so that was just such a blessing to me, for not only her to be encouraging me and who I am, but also I got an outlet through her to show me how my future could be when I find those places that God has for me. And then also encouraging, because Lori and I have similar gift sets, and so seeing her being fulfilled through Guatemala and the different things she's involved in with administration and leadership, and she does an amazing job, just as encouragement to me to be finding where God has for me, because it's just so fulfilling to even see other people also working through and how God is working in their life. So all that's just been a huge blessing to me.
Thanks, Becca. Well, even though we might not be dressed alike, we do have curly hair and the same spiritual gifts, so just saying, we have a similarity. But I think the way this relationship has impacted me is I would call it mutual accountability, because it's not just about holding the person who's younger than you accountable, they hold me accountable too, because we talk through different things, and I've learned a lot from Becca, so it's very mutually beneficial. I remember one time she talked about the idea of always wanting to be right, and I struggle with that too, and how sometimes we need to make relationships more important and love more important than being right. And so that really challenged me, and if I hadn't been in that relationship with her, I wouldn't have learned that. And then I also think it's important to think about what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Right now, my daughter's not following the Lord, and so I don't know. Hopefully she'll come back someday, and hopefully that'll be a legacy, but being able to work with Becca and Kate and knowing that they are on fire for the Lord and they are going to go off to college next year and be discipling other people. And that's part of the process, is teaching them how to disciple other people. So imagine if they disciple one person a year for the next 60 years. There's 120 people. And then if each of those people disciple, what kind of legacy can you leave by pouring into other people and that will lead beyond our time on earth? So I think that's really important. And in the fall, there will be classes for women, discipling women. I went through the kind of the test program. And but even if you haven't been trained officially, it's really just about implementing the rhythms of the bless that we went through. You begin with prayer, you listen and engage, you eat, and you serve together. If you could serve locally, we were able to serve on a mission trip, which is the ultimate serving together, and then sharing and being vulnerable and open. So anybody can do it, and it's really just a matter of having love and a willing heart and listening.
So I've been really inspired by Barb's joy and the passion that she has for the Lord, and just it's been so encouraging to see that in her life and the way that she lives her life. And I've also just been really encouraged by the accountability that I have with Barb. So I can set these goals for myself and tell her the things that I'm wanting growth in, because it's so easy when we're on our own to say those things and to try to do those things and then just fall away from them. But having someone that is my backbone, that is constantly reminding me of the things that I am desiring to do but can't do them on my own. And so having her there to help me through those things and also show me maybe different ways to approach them that I haven't thought about has been incredible. And I've just learned so much about the Lord and our relationship with the Lord through the things that Barb and I have studied together. So, for example, when we did the faithfulness word study, we picked one verse at a time that we went through. And so we would go back home and on our own time, by ourselves, we would go over this verse and the verses surrounding it and just really dig into what that meant and what faithfulness meant. And then we would journal about it, and we would just write down all of our thoughts. And when we came back together, we just shared what we had learned on our own about faithfulness. And then through that, we were able to come up with this, not exactly definition, but just meaning of faithfulness that blew my mind. Literally, it was so much more expansive than I ever thought the word faithfulness could mean. And so I was just really struck by that, the power of that, and how strong the Lord's faithfulness is toward us and the level of faithfulness that he calls us to. And so we found just this parallel between the word faithfulness and the word deny, and how when we are exhibiting faithfulness toward God, we are denying ourselves and fully embracing the things that he has put in place. And on the contrast, we cannot deny what God is telling us to do and God's plan for us. And so just being able to walk in that together and not only learn those things, but Barb has really showed me how to take that into my own life and live it out in the daily life, rather than just learning these things and talking about them, but living them and being able to put that in place.
She's the one. God is faithful over and over again. And he has been faithful in this relationship with Julia. He has cut out time for us over and over where we didn't have time. Busy. This one. And it's just been great. God has allowed us to enter into a relationship that otherwise wouldn't have happened without SML, which is Sunday Morning Live, and it is that. Part of the best part of my week is spending it with those high school kids and hearing what they have to say and all the mission moments, and it's just awesome. But, so thank you, Molly, Corey, Michael, church. Anyway, the things that I've learned from Julia is how she takes the word like faithfulness, and she just digs in. She digs in deep, and then the question comes, okay, so now what do we do with that? How are we going to put it in practice? How are we going to walk it out and live it? And it not only challenges her, but I'm talking to myself at the same time. So it's been great and fun to be that much more intentional in living our life with Jesus. And so, yeah, it's been awesome.
So one thing I've learned about my relationship with God through the discipleship is about having an active faith. You can learn all the theological themes and ideas you want, and you can get all the head knowledge you want, but unless you apply it to your heart and you go out and live for Jesus, it just doesn't matter. So that's something I've learned through this, and John's really challenged with what we'll call my homework. He's really challenged that with me. He's really challenged me with that to go out and live, to pray for people to come to know Christ, to have those conversations about Jesus with people I usually don't talk to about Jesus, to be searching deeper for questions. And he's even been challenging me to have my testimony ready, because there'll be times when people will just ask me, what is this whole God thing? And I need to have something ready that's practical, just to tell them. So John's been helping me with that, and these things and his accountability with me have really helped me to go out and actually live for Jesus and to have that active faith. So that's probably one of the most important things that I've learned, and John's really been hammering that into my head. Just go out and live for Jesus. So.
Yeah. So one of the greatest things and one of the greatest honors of doing discipleship, especially with students, is that it forces me to continue to be active in my faith and my growth in the Lord. And so because if I'm challenging Sam to pray for people that he wants to see the Lord move in their lives, or if I'm challenging him to go talk to people about God when it's outside of his comfort zone, or to be prepared with his testimony, or whatever it is, then I can't come back the next week and he's talking about all these things and I'm like, I watched a lot of Netflix, I can't. It forces me to go out and do those as well, and it forces me to continually look at what I believe, and because Sam will come to me with really hard questions as he grows. He'll come to me with a question, and sometimes it's a question I don't know the answer to necessarily right away, and so I've got to go dig into the Word, and I've got to go see. And one of the cool things that we've been doing lately, that sometimes he comes and he shakes his fist at me because he'll ask me a really deep question, and I'll be like, well, I don't know, Sam, what do you think? And I'll be like, hey, before we meet again, why don't you go look up in the Bible and find me examples of your question. Find examples of where Jesus talked about it, or the disciples, or in the Old Testament, and then I have to go and do the same. And so we come and we compare notes, and then I might have a little more life experience to share. I might have more, I can say, well, this is how I experienced this or worked through it 5 years ago, but Sam might bring a verse that I didn't really realize was pertinent to it, and we can look at it through new eyes. So it renews my own walk with Christ weekly as Sam and I are walking through that. The other thing is that it forces me to get better at listening to God and the prompts of God. So when Sam and I met that first time, it really was as a result of me feeling like, so I came back to Colonial about 10 years ago, and that was a prompting from God telling me, hey, you need to go and start investing in the lives of youth. I had been working for a youth-based mission organization, and I just saw that there were youth who needed the Lord, and I got in the car with my best friend Corey Osmond, who was the youth leader here at this time. He picked me up in Indiana to drive me back to Kansas City, and I said, hey man, I think the Lord wants me to work with youth. And he's like, that's good, because I signed you up for the freshmen. So that was, that was some confirmation. But in the last 10 years of working with the youth at Colonial, I constantly have to be listening to the Lord and trying to discern what the Lord wants me to do. And so when we had that first meeting, I felt like the Lord was saying, John, I want you to go deeper with Sam. So I did, scared the crud out of him, and we didn't talk again for a few months. But eventually the Lord brought that around. And even in our discipleship time now, we had been going through a book, and it was good, and I think both he and I were getting stuff out of it. But through a lot of Pastor Bob's talking about how he did discipleship, especially when he was working with the youth group a lot more, it convicted me, and I felt like the Lord was saying, hey, stop hanging out in the trenches and get Sam out there discipling as well, and so we've shifted course. So it forces me to listen to the Lord and then have to react, so that neither of us end up stagnant, even within the discipleship.
Perfect. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm like, as I sit here, there's so many different faces and people that I imagine, people that have poured into me and impacted me, people that I've had the opportunity to pour into, been invited into their lives, into their hard spaces, into the happy spaces. And it's just really powerful how God is a God of connection. He's a God of relationships, and we're made for this. And so it's really sweet to hear a glimpse into how this has impacted you all. And I hope that this reminds you of those people who have been really important blocks in your life. And truly, we would be nothing if it weren't for the people that surround us. And so it causes me, as I listen, to think, who is surrounding me? Who am I surrounding? Who needs to be seen? Who needs to be heard? Who needs someone to reach out to them? We live in an age where we're just busy and busy and busy. And it's one thing to be in pain and to be alone, but it's a whole nother thing to be in pain and to feel loved and to know that you have someone staying with you. And that's what Jesus does for us. Like, that's what he did by coming to this earth. He says, like, I am staying with you. You are worth it to me. And I experience that in a very powerful way when I sit with students, even just this past week, and feel like I get to witness Jesus in them. Like, not me being a witness to them. I mean, although there are times for that, it feels very little compared to how much they witness to me. And that requires us being vulnerable. That requires us sharing where we're at. And so oftentimes when, as they're talking about meeting with each other and sharing, both people are sharing. It's a two-way relationship. And Jesus was vulnerable in coming to earth to be with us. That's a very vulnerable thing. Vulnerable even just to create us, knowing that ultimately we would reject him. And so I have found myself trying to push myself to be vulnerable in hopes of really connection, because we crave that and we need that. So thanks for giving us glimpses into how this has impacted you, and I know that you all have impacted me as well. What else? I always love to ask the question of, like, if there's one thing that you want us to walk away with, or you want us to hear or to understand or to see about what God has done, what would you like to share?
I would like to share from a mother's perspective that as a mother, I have prayed for my children to have somebody come along in their life that would impact them for Jesus. And I would just encourage you that you might be that person. For somebody else, some other mother that's been praying for their children. And that's powerful. That can make a huge impact on a life. So I think of that as discipleship for sure, in an incredible way. And oftentimes you don't even know that mother's been praying, but you might be the answer to that mother's prayer. So also, discipleship, maybe you feel the need to be discipled. It's a two-way street. Let one of the pastors know, or, it's not just this relationship, it's peer-to-peer. So consider that as well. It's a wonderful journey.
Well, I just wanted to say, don't be scared. You don't have to know it all. Don't worry about age difference. Just have a willing heart. And I also wanted to say it's really exciting to be pouring into the younger generation, because these are the future leaders of our church, and we don't want the church to die. So we need to be pouring into the leaders. And it was really exciting to me that Becca and Kate, after we worked all day in Guatemala and we had our devotions, we had team sharing about 9, 10 o'clock at night, they were leading all the youth in a study in Philippians every night for about an hour. So that was really exciting to be a part of just pouring into the next generation. So just do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we went to the Cross Conference with the seniors of last year, and I was sitting next to Camden Twos, Jacob Vermillion, two guys that I was also discipling, and David Platt was teaching. So if you know David Platt, he just spits fire. I mean, he's an amazing teacher and powerful leader. So very, big voice, charismatic, and he was talking about his original kind of where he became a disciple, and a guy basically handed him a book, Born to Reproduce by Dawson Trotman. And it's this very simple, not confusing, small book that is literally just speaking about the concepts that God designed us intentionally to reproduce. And that discipleship doesn't just stop from here, from me to here, but to Gabe on. And it's like how he made us. And so he continued to just speak on the simplicity of what it means to disciple somebody else and to take that up, that it wasn't this unbelievable feat, but it was really this simple concept of living life with somebody else. And so I just want to challenge everybody to say, like, the enemy wants to use the concepts that only the paid professionals do things like that, right? That only the people who are on stage do these concepts. But that couldn't be further from the truth, and that's the enemy's way of stopping the church from multiplying to what it could be, right? To continue to go out into all the nations. And so I just charge you, it's simple, it's easy. Just be you, be real. Tell them who you are, your struggles, the things that you love, the things that God has taught you, the things that God is teaching you, the things that are difficult for you and where you're at in life now. And you'll be amazed at how people soak that up. And they want to hear that. They want to hear real people and just being simple and loving.
Yeah, to that, I think that there is this sense of like, okay, if I'm going to disciple somebody, I better sit down and map out, and we'll have, the first week we'll talk about this, and then we'll step to this and step to that. I have done discipleship where I've just called up a student and been like, hey, I've got to run a bunch of errands. You're going to go with me. And we're just gonna get those things done. And then as we shop, we talk about what we need. Or I said in the last service, I needed poison ivy supplies because I got into some helping my parents, and I made Sam join me while I did that. And he really grew from that. But it's getting into the rhythm of, hey, it's normal for us to talk, and it's normal for us to go deep even when we're shopping for poison ivy supplies or if we're, at the grocery store. It's an opportunity to normalize this idea of we're going to be walking with Jesus in everything we do. It's not like, well, we have to reserve it for this moment that we have to do it. And the other thing I wanted to say is don't be afraid to put yourself out there vulnerably for a discipleship relationship and then find that it doesn't work or it didn't really. When I was in college, one of my great mentors, John Schwartz, put me with another guy, and he was like, you guys, I think you're going to be perfect for each other. I think you're going to, and we met like 4 times, and we just couldn't, we liked each other as humans, but we could not connect. And we ended up, like, after about 4 times being like, this is never going to work, we should stop. And then years later, he and I are really great friends. He likes to talk about how he's mentored me all these years. But the mentorship didn't work out. The friendship did. But it didn't, there was no damage done, right? We had done life together for a little while and tried it. And it wasn't a good fit. And we both found other mentors and eventually other people to mentor as we went along. So I think there's a lot of this idea of like, oh, I've got to have the plan there. I've got to make sure it's perfect. I've got to make sure everything works out. Really, it's as simple as saying, Lord, who do you want me to see? Lord, how do you want me to talk to them? And in the end, Lord, what did I screw up and that I need to go back and do better next time? And that's your discipleship. And so I try to make it look more complicated for Sam so he thinks I'm really wise, but that's really it. And but that's that. So don't be afraid of discipleship because all it is sharing life and loving someone well within the Lord.
Yeah, along with that, I just want to encourage everyone to be intentional just in the way you interact with people. Even if you think like, I'm not discipling this person, there's not people that I'm meeting with that I'm impacting for the Lord, there are still so many ways that you can impact people if you just look for them in the things that you're already doing with them, and also looking for ways that you can add on to that, and small things like Barb texting me and just encouraging me and sending scripture and sending her prayers. really the impact of that just is so much more than we could ever imagine. And so just encouraging you all to seek out that type of relationship where you can encourage others in the Lord in the everyday things.
Yeah, and I'd also just like to add, sort of like the leaders were talking about, just how practical it is and how simple it is, and it's just fun. You know, I mean, you get to learn about Jesus with a great friend. You get to do life with them. Just once again, what Corey was saying, it's like anyone can do it. You know, it's like I was just sitting out there, you know, and I'm like, John, let's hang out. We hang out, you know. It's just so simple and fun and practical, and it's just do it, you know. It's awesome. So that's my encouragement.
Okay, I'll just add also, Lori, one thing she's talked to me, this illustration, which I'm sure everyone's heard of, like a cup, and you're being poured into, and ultimately where does that stuff pour out? And for me, that's also impacted just my personal time with God, but I think it really speaks to discipleship and being a mentor or mentee as well. Just the importance of that. And I know Molly has encouraged us afterwards to find someone to mentor, and that made me really uncomfortable because that's like one-on-one like that isn't in my comfort zone, yeah. But I think it really is important, and God on the Guatemala trip showed me someone who has similar struggles to me and that I've known for a while, and just that way that I could pour out to her before I go to college, and she can encourage me as well because we both have been struggling with the same things, and to me that's just so cool to be given the opportunity. And I just want to thank the leaders up here because they've been such a big blessing to us, and when we think about like each of us, weirdly enough, even though we're not all dressed the same, we have similar gifts or similar personalities, and God has just paired us up each very well, I think. We were talking about that after, and I was like, wow, like this really does work. And God places those people in our lives. So I would encourage you, just be in prayer and searching for people to be intentional with or actually go in discipleship with, because it is just such a big blessing. Even just the fellowship part of it is just so amazing. It is just so purposeful and just so real, and I've absolutely loved that.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing your stories. They'll all be up here after the service to pray with you, to ask questions if you have any. I'm sure they would love to tell many more stories. There's a lot more where that came from. But yeah, it's amazing what can happen when we just say yes and when we connect with people. It is so powerful. Have you ever been in a conversation where you're like, okay, I'm just going to show up? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I never expected it to go that way. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's super healing and really powerful. And so I would just encourage each of us to show up in a new way. Bring yourself. You don't need to pretend you're something that you're not. I tell all my students a lot. They'll like laugh and make fun of me for different quirks I have. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, you be you. Don't try to be me, because the Holy Spirit wants to use you, not you trying to be someone else. And so I just love the uniqueness of how God uses us and how God isn't put in a box, or he's not, he's very creative. He's very creative. So thanks for listening to our stories. Thanks for sharing. And I'll just pray to close us. Jesus, we're just so grateful that we know your name and that you know ours. And that you are someone who entered into our world not only to stay with us, but to heal us and to save us and to transform us and to empower us to be your instruments of healing and hope to a hopeless world. And God, I thank you that you can still use us when we're scared. You can use us when we're broken. You can use us when we don't really know how anything good can come. God, we thank you that you are always with us and that we are never too much for you to handle. God, I just pray that this morning we would be able to worship you in a deeper way because of the people that you have put in our lives. Even if they're not in our lives right now, God, we just thank you that that we've been able to impact people and people have been able to impact us for the time that you have. God, we just thank you. And we pray that you would open our eyes to see people who need to be seen. People who need to be heard, people who need to be loved, because it's in being known and loved and seen and heard by you that we can then do that for other people. Jesus, we thank you for the stories that have been shared today, and really just want them to paint a more captivating picture of who you are. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. I think one of my favorite things too about discipleship is there's a quote by C.S. Lewis who says that next to, we won't actually see God in this life, but looking at our neighbor is the next closest thing to seeing God, because we're all created in God's image. And how often do I go through the day and don't look at people? I look down and I get a headache from looking down. What if we actually looked at someone else next to us, even leaving here today, and appreciated the ways that Jesus is in each one of us because we were created in his image. So thanks for being here with us today.